The question landed like a slap in the middle of a bright, ordinary afternoon, sharp enough to cut through laughter and the clinking of coffee mugs. It was the kind of question that wasn't supposed to belong in daylight, not in a cozy kitchen filled with sunlight and the smell of fresh bread. Yet there it was, hanging in the air, heavy and reckless, waiting for an answer that no one was prepared for. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of people who carry invisible burdens, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Echoes the Stories. Your support keeps stories like this alive. The kitchen felt warm and alive that day, the kind of warmth that wrapped itself around your chest and made you forget the world outside. Rowan Hale stood by the counter, sleeves rolled up, his hands steady as he poured coffee into mismatched mugs. Across from him, his best friend Callum Vance leaned casually against the wooden island, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, always ready with a joke that teetered just on the edge of inappropriate. The question came out of nowhere, tossed like a pebble into still water, rippling outward. Callum had said it lightly, with a laugh, but there was a sharp curiosity behind it, something probing. The woman standing near the window, Maris Aloan, had gone still. Her smile froze just slightly, her eyes flickering between the two men. Rowan didn't laugh. For a brief moment, everything seemed to pause. Outside, sunlight filtered through the trees, casting moving shadows on the floor. A breeze nudged the curtains, carrying the faint sound of children playing somewhere down the street. Inside, though, the air grew thick, like a storm was about to break. Rowan set the coffee pot down carefully. His hands didn't tremble, but his chest tightened, as if something long buried had been dragged suddenly to the surface. He wasn't embarrassed, not in the way Callum had probably expected. He was tired. Tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. His gaze shifted briefly toward the hallway, where a small pair of shoes sat neatly by the wall. That tiny detail, so easy to overlook, carried more weight than any answer he could give. Then he spoke. And everything changed. Rowan's life had not always been defined by quiet kitchens and careful routines. Once, it had been louder, brighter, filled with plans that stretched far into the future. But those plans had fractured the day he became a single father, not by choice, not by preparation, but by the kind of sudden loss that leaves no room for rehearsal. His daughter, Elia, had been barely 2 years old when the world shifted beneath his feet. One moment, life had been shared laughter and late-night conversations; the next, it was hospital corridors, hushed voices, and a silence that refused to lift. Grief didn't arrive as a dramatic storm. It seeped in slowly, settling into the corners of his life, reshaping everything. From that point on, Rowan's days were measured differently. Time was no longer his own. It belonged to early mornings, small breakfasts, scraped knees, bedtime stories, and the constant, quiet vigilance of someone who could not afford to falter. Love, in its rawest form, became action. It was showing up, again and again, even when exhaustion pressed down like a weight on his shoulders. Callum had been there through it all, in his own imperfect way. He had cracked jokes when the silence became unbearable, dragged Rowan out for coffee when he withdrew too far, and refused to let him disappear entirely into the role of just a father. But even Callum didn't fully understand the depth of what Rowan carried. And Maris, she was new. She had entered their lives like a gentle shift in the seasons, not abrupt, not overwhelming, but undeniably present. She lived a few houses down, a teacher with a quiet laugh and a way of noticing things others overlooked. She had first met Rowan on a morning when Elia had tripped on the sidewalk, tears streaming down her face. Maris had knelt beside them, offering a bandage and a smile that didn't feel forced. From then on, their paths seemed to cross more often. Small conversations turned into longer ones. Shared smiles became comfortable silences. There was no grand declaration, no sudden spark, just a slow, steady unfolding of something that neither of them rushed to define. But beneath that growing connection, Rowan carried a fear he rarely voiced. He wondered if he had anything left to give beyond what he already poured into his daughter. He questioned whether there was space in his life for something more, or if love, in that sense, had become something distant, almost unreachable. That was why Callum's question hit harder than it should have. Because it wasn't really about what it seemed. Rowan finally looked up, his eyes steady but heavy with something deeper than discomfort. When he answered, his voice was calm, but there was a quiet intensity beneath it that made the room feel smaller. He didn't deflect. He didn't joke. Instead, he said something that no one expected. He spoke about nights spent sitting beside a crib, whispering stories to a child who couldn't sleep. About learning how to braid tiny strands of hair with clumsy fingers. About the way love changes when it's no longer about passion or excitement, but about presence, patience, and unwavering commitment. He said that being good at anything meaningful wasn't about performance or bravado. It was about showing up when it mattered most, even when no one was watching. It was about listening, truly listening, and caring in ways that didn't seek recognition. And then he said something that lingered long after the words faded. He said that if he ever gave himself to someone again, it wouldn't be half-hearted. It wouldn't be fleeting. It would be with the same depth, the same fierce devotion that defined everything he did for his daughter. The room fell silent. Callum's smirk disappeared, replaced by something quieter, almost reflective. He hadn't meant to touch something so raw, so real. For once, he didn't have a joke ready. Maris, though, stood very still. Her eyes softened, not with pity, but with understanding. In that moment, she saw Rowan not just as a single father, not just as the man who lived down the street, but as someone who had been reshaped by love and loss in ways that made him stronger, not weaker. Something shifted inside her. The rest of the afternoon moved on, conversations picking up again, laughter returning in small, tentative bursts. But the energy had changed. It was deeper now, more grounded. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting golden light across the kitchen, Maris found herself lingering by the doorway. Rowan was outside, helping Elia pick up scattered toys from the yard. The little girl's laughter rang out, bright and unrestrained, cutting through the quiet like music. Maris watched them for a moment, something warm and unfamiliar settling in her chest. This wasn't the kind of love that announced itself loudly. It didn't demand attention. It simply existed, steady and unwavering, in the small, everyday moments that most people overlooked. And for the first time in a long while, she found herself wondering if that was exactly the kind of love she had been searching for. Rowan, unaware of her gaze, lifted Elia into his arms, spinning her gently until her laughter turned into delighted squeals. There was a lightness in that moment, a glimpse of joy that hadn't been erased by everything he had endured. Maybe, just maybe, there was room for something new. Time moved forward, as it always does, carrying with it both challenges and quiet breakthroughs. Rowan didn't change overnight. He still struggled with doubt, still hesitated at the edge of something deeper. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, he began to let Maris in. It started with small things. A shared cup of coffee. A walk through the neighborhood. Conversations that stretched a little longer each time. There were no grand gestures, no sweeping declarations, just a growing sense of trust. Maris didn't rush him. She understood, in a way few others could, that healing wasn't linear. It didn't follow a neat path or adhere to expectations. It unfolded in its own time, shaped by patience and quiet resilience. And Rowan, in turn, began to realize something he hadn't allowed himself to consider before. That loving someone again didn't mean forgetting the past. It didn't diminish what had been lost. It simply meant choosing, once more, to open his heart, even with all the risks that came with it. As their connection deepened, there were moments of hesitation, of fear creeping in at the edges. But there were also moments of undeniable clarity, where everything felt right in a way that was both grounding and exhilarating. And in those moments, Rowan began to understand that being good at love wasn't about perfection. It was about courage. The courage to try again. The courage to be vulnerable. The courage to believe that something beautiful could still exist, even after everything had been broken. If this story has touched your heart even a little, take a moment to like, comment, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that second chances are real. And before we reach the end, tell us in the comments, do you believe people can truly love again after loss? Because in the quiet glow of another ordinary day, as Rowan stood beside Maris and watched Elia chase butterflies across the yard, the answer felt clear. Sometimes, the most powerful answers don't come from clever words or quick wit. They come from the life a person chooses to live. And sometimes, that answer changes everything.